Today we're going to wrap up our shop tour series with the third and final video where we cover all the other ins and outs of this shop. Let's get to it. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you didn't catch the first two videos, we went over the miter table in detail and the saw table in detail. I will link those videos in the description. With that, let's get to it. This is my fabrication space, so a nice open space. Normally the boat's right here, and it won't be there for very much longer. We just have it there while I'm doing some fabrication stuff to it. But normally I will be pulling my welding table and my welder. And even when I blacksmith, I'll pull this stuff out into this bigger area where I can have some room to get dirty and throw dust and clean it up later. So the welder I'm running right now is the Lincoln HD 140. And for those of you that don't know, the HD just means Home Depot. So I bought this from Home Depot, and I think the only difference between this and the one you buy from Lincoln directly is a couple of plastic parts internally. I think they do that to get the cost down. Overall, this has been a great welder for me. It's done the things I need to, but when I bought it, I only had access to a 110 outlet. Didn't know what I was doing to add another outlet, so I went with the one that I could use right away, which I think was a mistake. So for those of you looking to purchase a welder, I suggest just spending the extra money on, the 180 or bigger, 220 volt outlet ones. Although I think the Harbor Freight one will do both 110 and 220, but run the 220 because it just does such a better job. It gets hotter. It can handle much thicker steel. If you're not at least buying one with the option to add a 220 outlet later, you're wasting your money. So don't do it. I've had this for almost 10 years. So again, it's done what I've needed it to do. Just doing it all over again, I wouldn't have started with this. I will be buying a new welder here soon. We'll be doing it on an unboxing video as part of our welding playlist on this channel. We're gonna do a new MIG welder. So again, a 180 amp or up MIG, 220 volt. And then we're also gonna be doing a TIG welder coming up as well. Stay tuned and hit that like and subscribe for that. This is my welding table that I built, and I love this thing. You can see it's got kind of an interesting style to the top here. It's not just all holes. This is actually a top off of a 70s Craftsman table saw. Back then they used the cast iron tops, so it's super flat. By default, I did not have to flatten this or do any milling, and I think I got the saw for 70 bucks on Facebook, and then just took the top off, sanded it, or not sanded it, but buffed it and got it all nice and polished smooth, and then built the stand out of 2x2 steel here, and then just bolted it to the top. It already had some threaded screws in the bottom, or threaded holes in the bottom, so it was super easy to do and rather inexpensive. So versus the hundreds, if not thousands of dollars you can spend on welding tables, this is a great project to build your own. So I of course have different mounting clamps for it. I drilled all these holes, which sucked. It took a lot of time. And I did not have a mag drill. I just did it with a drill guide. So you don't have to spend a ton of money on a mag drill. You can still do it with a drill guide. It's a pain in the butt and it takes forever. So the best part about these is that I can do some interesting stuff. Let me grab a clamp here. So I store all my clamps around the side. So I can take these clamps and I can really get them into some interesting clamping positions inside here, like so. So where you've got a solid table and you can only clamp down from the top like these, this gives me the ability to get into some weird clamping positions. Plus, when I go to make a 90 degree, I can actually clamp, because I know this is 90, I've checked it. This turn right here is perfectly 90. So I can clamp a bar here and a bar here with a support underneath and get my perfect 90 degree welds. Up underneath is where I've got my helmet storage. I always feel like I'm constantly searching for a place to put my helmet when I'm welding. So I just put some clips up under here. So when I need to take it off and I need to hang it, I can just put it right there. And then this is the cheap one, I think, that comes from Harbor Freight. I just use this for my camera now. So I'll stick my camera behind that lens and you can get a good camera shot of welding. All right, so this is my blacksmith setup. As you saw in the previous videos, these things are normally stored over here along the wall. So I do have to pull these out, but it takes about 3 seconds to do it. So not crazy efficient, but still pretty efficient. And you'll see you got 3 separate pieces here. So this is my forge press that I use for doing forge welding, making Damascus. My forge over here is a Majestic Forge, so I did not build that, I bought it. And then my anvil is an Anvil brand anvil, 120 pounds. I wish I had a bigger one, to be honest with you. I think every blacksmith wishes they had a bigger anvil, but for the price that they cost, they're extremely expensive these days. The 120 pound works just fine for what I need it for. So a little more on the anvil. The anvil is mounted to a wood stump, of course. For everybody that blacksmiths, most of the time you're mounting to a wood stump, although I've seen plenty of people doing it on a metal stand. Putting it on a wood stump definitely helps absorb some of the energy when you're hammering down. And then I have my hammers mounted just to some screws coming out of the side here, which isn't the best way to do it. Coming up here, I'm gonna be taking some leather straps and making some better hooks. When I pull this thing out, these hammers tend to fall off, so the leather straps will hold it much better. So we got, of course, our blacksmith hammers, which are dedicated to blacksmithing. I use them for nothing else. I've got a kind of an interesting way that I mounted the anvil to the stump. I didn't have the best way to cut this flat. I had a chainsaw and I'm not very good with chainsaws, so I got it as flat as I could. I used some shims to get it level underneath with a piece of flat bar and some lag bolts, sucking it down into the wood stump. And I think these lag bolts are like 8 to 10 inches. So they're huge, they're long. They go clear down into this thing. And so they really anchored it and good. It's not going anywhere. Looking further at my Majestic Forge. So this is a pretty common forge. I think you guys will see Forged in Fire had them on for a long time, was the brand they always used. I do have a cracked brick in the front here that I'll need to fix, but that's pretty common for forges after a period of time. It's on a Harbor Freight welding table right now. That needs to go away. We're gonna build a separate stand for this thing coming up here in one of our fabrication videos. It'd be nice to get something on the front here that I can, when I put my pieces in, it will have a rest. I've seen a lot of other blacksmiths build some cool stands that have rests on the front, plus maybe some sliding doors would be nice. So we'll be doing that in an upcoming video. This one is a 5-burner forge. I went ahead and just bought the bigger one up front. I rarely use all 5 burners unless I'm doing something long like a sword. Most of the time, I'd say 99% of the time, I'm using 2 burners. So it's kind of a waste. This whole back half of the forge tends to lose heat when you're not using it. So all these bricks are here because I'll shove this forge full of bricks up to this point just to kind of keep some of the heat in and not waste too much propane. So this is my 20-ton forge press that I built out of a log splitter. In retrospect, these log splitters are expensive. I probably would have chose to build it from scratch and just buy my hydraulic system separately. But it works. I use this for all my forge welding and it does a really good job at it. I've never had a problem with it. We did have some damage to it when we moved, so I'll show you that in a second that we're gonna have to repair. We'll do a video on that. But it's just a log splitter stood straight up, built with an anvil on the bottom, so that's all welded into place. A cart on the bottom, and then I reused the hydraulic tank, which in retrospect, maybe not the best idea because it's so big and awkward, but it works. So save me some money. Like I was talking in the move, we had a damaged hose here. So this cracked and something fell into this filter and damaged this filter. So we need to replace this hose, replace this filter, fill it back up with hydraulic fluid and bleed it of air. And then originally this had a gasoline motor and I converted it to electric on a 210 outlet. So I have an extra Kohler motor that came from this thing that we'll do something with on this channel later, but much more efficient to work off of the electric motor versus the gas. Plus I can run it in my garage without having to worry about fumes. All right, everyone, let's start by talking about some infrastructure work that I did here. Starting with the electrical. So this sub panel back here was not in when I moved in 2 years ago. I've added this. There was a jacuzzi tub pre-wired to the back side here, so I didn't have to run a main run from the main electrical panel to the sub panel. I reused that feed for the hot tub, which was a 50 amp breaker. So it was 50 amp rated wiring, and then just added the sub panel and really removed the hot tub from the equation. We don't have a hot tub. We're never planning on adding a hot tub. You can see right here that we've left it in place just when we sell the house. The option still exists. But from there, I wired out to all my new electrical ports, including 200 20 volt outlet for my welding and my grinder, 20 amp dedicated outlets for my tools. I have specific lights over my saw table, which we'll go over here in a second. And then I have a dedicated breaker for my dust control system, which will also go over here in a second. And then I have a circuit of 15 amp, just tabletop outlets for light duty stuff. So all my tools are on 20 amp outlets with all my tabletop light duty stuff on 15 amp outlets. Now, some of you may ask me, why didn't I just run 20 for everything? And the reason is because copper was so expensive at the time that when I bought all my wire, it was ridiculously expensive. So I needed to save some money somewhere. So by going to a 15 amp breaker meant that I had to run smaller gauge wire and it cost considerably less. So on my bench tops here, I have dedicated lighting for my benchtop lights, which I'll show you in a second. These are the 15 amp outlets that I was just talking about, so light duty work right there, with each tool having its own dedicated 20 amp outlet behind. Same for over here. My bandsaw and my drill press both have their own 20 amp breakers. And then the grinding station here, which is a whole nother monster we're gonna talk about in a second, has a 220 volt outlet and a 220 volt outlet for future welding. So regarding the lighting, all the fixtures in the ceiling right here were installed when I moved in, thankfully, so I didn't have to wire for any of this because that would have been even more ridiculously expensive. But I did change out the fluorescent bulbs for LED bulbs, and these are 1800 lumen bulbs, and they are rated to, I think, 55,000 hours. So shouldn't have to replace the lights or bulbs for a really long time. And the huge benefit, of course, is for when I'm filming here, they're really bright. So I don't really have to do any lighting setup when I'm setting up for my camera shots. Plus, it just lights the shop up really, really nice. So I can see everything, I don't cast a lot of shadows. However, you can see in this front area of the shop here, missing some lights. I'll be adding another row of 3 LED fixtures along here, which will really help when we do fabrication in this third bay, or we're working on cars in the car bay. Okay, everyone. So in addition to the ceiling lights that were here when I first moved in, I've added some lights, which would be my bench lights right here. So my ceilings are 15 feet tall, so I need to get lights down closer to my bench. And in order to do that, I had to build some brackets out of some melamine here. This is relatively cheap. This is actually some leftover melamine I had left from my cabinet build. So I just designed a little bracket, and I had these normal shop lights from before. So I just pulled the ballast out. I bypassed all the ballast in these and converted them to LED lights. So again, same color as the ceiling lights, same lumen count, which is I think 1800 lumens with 55,000 hours of usage before I have to change a bulb. So these were really inexpensive to convert, and they last a long time, and they really brought down the light onto my bench top so I can really see what I'm working on. In addition to these lights, I added a really bright, and I forget the specs on this light, really bright light over my grinding table. And for those of you who has ground steel, you know that really good light is really important to see where your scratches are and in order to get them out, so you don't have to find out later that you've got to drop back down to a grit and start all over again. So on top of my benches, I also added 4 lights back in my saw table room here. Again, same thing, I had these lights from before and I just converted them to LED, ran wires up in the ceiling there, and then installed a switch in the back. So some other really cool features of note here would be this stuff hanging on the ceiling. You'll see there I got my wheelbarrow, which takes up a huge amount of room when it's sitting on the floor, along with all these bikes. If you can imagine, if I had these bikes in the ground, I would have no floor space at all. So that was really the first thing I did when I moved in, is put up all these hangers. I forget exactly the name of the company that I bought them from, but I will post a link in the description if you're interested on how to do it. But they work really slick. If you notice, there's these ropes here that come down and then attach to the wall. And so all you do is take that rope off, give it a tug, and it slowly comes down, the bike comes down. So it's not like a speed rush, just drops out of the sky. I mean, we've had our kids been able to use it, and they can drop it no problem, so it's super user friendly. Again, I'll drop a link in the comments for you guys if you're interested in these. And just to show you the wheelbarrow one, which is slightly different. So I got that thing on. So save yourself a lot of floor space by getting your stuff hung in the ceiling. Another mentionable is the shop winch. Again, this is probably, I don't know, the second thing I added besides hanging stuff from the ceiling. This thing's really handy. I use it for a lot of stuff. I work alone most of the time, so it helps with some heavy lifting. I can pull my truck all the way in here if I need and pull something out of the truck bed. I clean my deer during hunting season right there. I'll use this to lift the boat. So this is the Harbor Freight version. Again, I will drop you guys a link in the comments. I want to say it was like 150, 160 bucks when I bought it. And the load capacity there's an extra pulley hook that it comes with. I think gives you 1,600 pounds. Don't quote me on that. I'll put that in a text box right here. All right, so another really cool feature of the shop that I did when I moved in here is this is my dust control system. Now, most of you are probably saying, well, no, that looks like a central vac. That's because it is. The motor is a central vac unit. And I think I'm probably gonna get a lot of comments if people watch this video that it'll destroy this unit. I can tell you I've been using this for 2 years now, and it absolutely does not destroy it. The key to this is this cyclone piece here and the bucket underneath. Of course, I had to build that shelf, and there's a lip on that bucket that I had to kind of design this wood bracket for, and there's a rubber seal that connects the top and the bucket. But what this does is when the debris and suction comes in here, it all spins around and everything that's heavy drops into this bucket below. So most of the dust goes into this bucket, and I just empty it, and then I might get a small amount of debris in here. This is just really dusty from not cleaning it, but I've never gotten more than, I mean, this much debris in here. So it does not damage the motor. I happen to have one of these central vac units laying around, so I used it. It may not be the cheapest option for you guys, unless you could maybe find one on Facebook Marketplace or something like that. Otherwise, your standard systems might be a little bit cheaper. I think that thing's $800 or $900 brand new. I got it for free, so why not use it? The huge benefit is that it has a small footprint. Most of these dust control systems take up such a large amount of space, and I didn't want that because I have limited space in this shop. So this really allows me to get everything nice and tight up against the wall. Now you can see that off of the machine here, or off of the cyclone, I converted everything to plumbing pipe, not central vac pipe. That stuff's really hard to get, and ran my outlets straight down the wall. So behind each tool, we have a dust gate. And this dust gate I built. I didn't like the ones that you can buy from Rockwell or whatever, so I bought them, and then I cut them out. And you can see here, and I had to put beeswax. I built these slider gates here, and I had to put beeswax on this so it slides, but then cut the holes out so that way when it opens, it slides nice and smooth. And then the way I trigger the vacuum to turn on is I've got a set of wires right here that run from these pressure switches in series over to the motor. And so every time they kick on, just like a central vac unit would, every time that releases, kicks on the motor. I'll go ahead and show you what this looks without the hose on there. Just so you can see, it's gonna be hard to see how it's closed. There's no air allowed to pass until it opens up. That way you're maintaining a pressurized system no matter which gate opens. So when one gate opens, it's the only one getting suction, which is what you want, of course. Otherwise you lose pressure. So behind each tool, I have a dust gate that I built, and one dedicated for the grind. So we still have a little bit of infrastructure work to do. I still want to add AC to the shop. Of course, it gets hot in the summer, and I want to be able to work out here in the summer in comfort. We also have air lines for the compressor to run. I haven't ran those yet, although I do. My compressor's terrible. I think in an upcoming video here shortly, because I need it sooner than later, I will be building a new higher CFM compressor along with a cooler so we can paint without getting water into our paint. So if that's interests you, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. I was fortunate enough that when I moved in, the heat was already installed. So in the winter here, it gets really cold, and this thing has been a lifesaver. It's a little small for my shop. It still works though, it keeps it comfortable. You can see where it's already vented. So when I install my AC system, all I really need to do is splice off of that vent line, and then I will run a vent down here and do a floor mounted AC unit on the ground. So it shouldn't be too bad. I think those units run about 300 bucks. Again, completely underrated for this shop. However, one of the additional things I want to do would be to add a divider right here. And I've priced these things out. They're not cheap, but they're not crazy expensive. I think what I'm going to get is one of those car wash dividers that will pull back and forth across here. And the reason for the divider, of course, is to keep my heat in and my AC, but also to stop some dust spread into our main garage so it doesn't cover the cars that are parked in there. All right, everybody, that pretty much wraps up this 3-part series shop tour. I hope you got some useful information out of it. Feel free to leave some comments and feedback in the comments area of this video. The next video, we are going to start our first official build video, so super exciting. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. We're going to be building some lit trailer bunks for a boat. Thanks for watching.